Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf vav in Masechet Chulin. So wonderful to be continuing our learning together as we now begin Masechet Chulin. We're on the fourth line. Let me share my screen and we will get really started. So uh, yesterday we concluded that Rabban Gamliel had made a general rule not to eat meat that was slaughtered by a kuti. And that it wasn't just whether dependent, didn't make a difference whether you were standing over the person. If it was shechted by a kuti, we're not going to eat it. But Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Asi had rejected the gzera, and so as we pick up on the fourth line of Daf Vav Amud Aleph, the Gemara wonders why Rabban Gamliel made the rule, and will implicitly through this understand why the rule was not widely adopted. Okay, so Umay Taima Gazru Bahu Rabbanan. Why did the rabbis, namely Rabban Gamliel, and there was also a gzera that we had, which it's right now is referring just to Rabban Gamliel. Why did he say that shchita by a kuti is not valid? Ki had Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar shad Rabbi Meir. It was like the case where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar was sent by Rabbi Meir. La tuye chamra mibei kutai, and he was sent to get some wine from Kutim. Ashkechei hahu saba. A particular old man met him along the way. Amrlei, and he said to him, quoting a pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Gimel pasuk bet, V'samta sakin below echa im baal nefesh ata, that you are putting your knife at your throat if you are a baal nefesh. Baal nefesh, generally means somebody who's careful, particularly in spiritual matters. Take a look at Rashi, Baal nefesh ata. Imadak adam kasherata. If you're a good person, a kosher person, keda'amar b'sachim. That's what it means. That's what the technically Baal nefesh means, as we say in psachim. Baal nefesh, when it comes to somebody who is a good person, a careful person, a kosher person, lo yaltut adam kasher. That when it comes to a Baal nefesh, he is not going to soak, and this is referring to wheat on Pesach. He's not going to do that because he is a good person, and so a person who does the right thing, and so because we're worried, of course, about it becoming chametz, and so as a result, that's what a Baal nefesh is, and so if what the older man is saying to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is, be careful, don't go, don't do this, because if you want to be a careful person. So halak Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar b'sipra devarim lifnei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar goes back and he tells Rabbi Meir what happened, the gazar alayan, and as a result of that, Rabbi Meir made a decree associated with the kutim. So my time, what was the reason? Meaning, is it just because this person? This older person said something, and we'll get to who that person was in a moment. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak explains, no, the reason wasn't that, but Demus Yona Matz'ula hen Berosh Har Grizim. They found the appearance of a dove, meaning some object that looked like a dove, at the top of Har Grizim. Shayu Ovdin Ota, and the Kutim who were in the area of Har Grizim, they would worship it. Rabbi Meir l'taimei dechayesh l'miuta. And even though that these people who were worshiping it was a minority of the Kutim at the time, Rabbi Meir is concerned about a minority. The Gazar Ruba atu miuta, and he made a gzera to say that we're not going to allow a majority, meaning that even the majority is going to be considered prohibited as a result of the minority. Meaning, and take a look at Rashi, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi on Vav Amud Aleph, Matzu lahen otam hayoshim b'har grizim. Those specifically kutim who lived on har grizim, v'nasu mumarim la'avodas kochavim. They had become essentially apostates for avodah zarah. And even though most of the kutim were not from har grizim and therefore were not part of this group, Rabbi Meir is, according to his reasoning, because he is concerned about the minority biyavamos when it came to Masechet Yavamos, Daf Samach Aleph Amud Bet, where he says Katan uktana lo choltzin below miyavim. A minor cannot engage in either chalitza or yibum. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. So amlo lo Rabbi Meir, and so they said to Rabbi Meir, Yafa Marta lo choltzin. You're absolutely right when it comes to not doing chalitza. Because ish ksiv b'parsha, in the Torah, when it says about chalitza, it uses the term ish, implying not a minor. Mimnei ma lo miyavmin, but why can't they engage in yibum? So Amar Lahen, he explained to them, katan shema yematzis, when it comes to a minor male, maybe it'll turn out that he's impotent. Katana shema timsa ailanis, and maybe when it comes to a girl, maybe she also lacks the ability to have children, and she's an islandess. She's not going to develop into a full-fledged woman. The nimsu pogein be'erva, and then if they aren't able to have children, well, then the whole purpose of this relationship in Yibum, where a brother marries his brother's widow, it's going to really be an engagement of, it's going to be an act of illicit sexuality. Because if you, outside the context of Yibum, a brother's wife, even after the brother passes away, is prohibited. And so as a result, given the fact that maybe this minor child could be impotent and thereby result in the marriage being an improper marriage. So as a result, Rabbi Meir says you're not allowed to do it. Below Amar, and we don't say, and Rabbi Meir doesn't say in that context, Rov Katanim Einim Srisim. We don't say that the minor of them, that the majority are not going to be have impotence issues and therefore should be allowed to get married, and therefore we should follow the Rove, and even if it turns out that the person is impotent, that we're going to say that it was okay for them to get married. So now we continue back into the Gemara. So that was...
He doesn't follow the Rove then, in that case.
Correct. Rabbi Meir doesn't follow the Rove.
Wait. He does. Wait a second. Over in that case,
he does not follow the Rove. That's exactly what we're saying here. Even though the Rove of Kutim do not worship the dove on the top of Har Grizim, so too, and we're still going to prohibit wine from all of them. And just as most children will not grow up to be impotent, and so we're still going to say that all children are not allowed to engage in Yibum. So that's minors are not allowed to engage in Yibum. So those are this exact same kind of logic. We're going to ignore the majority. The majority are not idol worshipers, and the majority are not going to become impotent. And so, as a result, and we're going to prohibit both the wine of kutim and the engagement of yibum by a minor.
So why isn't this with the kutim here? Why isn't this an issue of chashud b'kasherim? Normally, we give someone. That's what we hold, right? That if we assume someone is kosher until proven otherwise, so why are we because
they're kutim, they're not full-fledged Jews. That's exactly the issue. If we knew that their engagement in the conversion was all great and wonderful, that would be one thing. They would be full-fledged Jews, but we already have a suspicion about them. And so once we have a second reason to have a suspicion about them, so then we're going to implement that suspicion. And that's what Rabbi Meir is going to do. Remember that we don't actually effectively paskin this way, because let's take a look at the next line of the Gemara, where beginning of the third to last narrow line at the top of the Gemara on Vav Amud Aleph. The Rabban Gamliel Beit Dino Nami Rabbi Meir Svirlo. And Rabban Gamliel, when he was holding that we're not going to follow the shechit, will allow the shechita of kutim, he was following Rabbi Meir, meaning he was following because a minority of them are idolaters. We're going to prohibit the slaughter by any of them. And again, that in fact is not how we would paskin, because we don't paskin like Rabbi Meir with respect to following the minority or being concerned about a minority. No, we're actually going to follow the majority in general. Of course, there may be exceptions in a variety of cases, but the general rule is that we're going to follow the majority. And so as a result, that explains why we saw yesterday that Rav Asi and Rabbi Yochanan had rejected this gzeira. Let's just note who is this old man. So Tosfos helps us out while also reminding us of a particular instance. So Ashkehu Saba. So Yesh Mefarshim to Kol Makom Shehu Maskir Hahu Saba Hu Eliyahu. In general, there are some who say that every time that it says Hahu Saba, it must refer to Eliyahu Hanavi. V'iyashar lo markein. But you cannot actually say that. Because the parak b'mamed likin in the second parak of Masechet Shabbos, Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, b'uvda the Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Well, it's appropriate to talk about Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, given that his yard site was yesterday, and so as a result, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, in that case over in Shabbos, ends up effectively looking at the this Hahu Saba in the wrong way and causing his death. And so as a result, that can't be if it's Eliyahu Hanavi, because that would not work. So as a result, effectively, Tosfos is saying it could be that in general it's Eliyahu Hanavi, but it can't be every time. Okay.
There's a case where he looked at him and he burned up with a
Correct.
was that him or his son that
well, the two of them had left the cave at the time.
Right.
Exactly. So in any event, the bottom line is that the Hahu Saba doesn't make it through that story, and so it can't be Eliyahu. Okay, but in any event, Pashte Dekra b'mai ksiv, we now go back and say, hey, that pasuk that you cited in Mishli, where it says, put a knife to your jaw if you are a spiritually careful person. What is it actually talking about? So the Gemara explains, "B'talmud hayoshiv lifnei Rabbo." It's referring to a student sitting in front of his teacher. The Tani Rabbi Chia, as Rabbi Chia taught in the following brisa, quoting both this pasuk and the pasuk that came before it. Kisei shev lilchom es moshel. When you sit to eat bread with a ruler, Bin tavin es asher lefanecha. Bin tavin es asher lefanecha. Understand well what is in front of you. V'samta sakin below echa, and put a knife at your jaw or at your throat. Im bal nefesh ata, if you are a careful person. So what does that mean? So Rabbi Chia explains, or the Brisa explains, Im yodea talmud barabo sheyodea lahachzir lo tam bin. If the student knows about his teacher, that he's able to answer questions, great. Ask him the questions and analyze everything, because the teacher will be able to help you understand. V'im lav, but if you cannot, if that teacher is unable to answer your questions and respond to them, tavin, you should understand as asher lefanecha, what is in front of you. You should understand what you can, meaning visamta sakin beloecha, and put the knife at your at your throat. So what does that mean? So take a look at Rashi. V'im lo tavin es asher lefanecha. So it's 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 19 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. V'im lav, if the person cannot answer your questions, tavin es asher lefanecha, mi'atzmecha, understand what you can on your own. Ve'al tishal, don't ask him questions. Meaning, if you know that the person is not going to be able to answer your question, don't ask it. V'tevayshenu, because you'll end up embarrassing him. But instead, Visamta sakin beloecha, put the knife at your throat. Basrai, the high kra, basrei the high kra. Right after that other pasuk about the understanding, it says this. Ksiv, this is written. Kolomer, it's as if to say, hitchazek atzmacha, strengthen yourself. Va'atzor picha, and hold back your mouth. Milishol, from asking the question. Meaning, the goal here is to discover truth, not to embarrass people. And if you're asking a question to potentially embarrass the person to whom you're asking the question, that is usser, and we should be very careful not to do it. And then continuing on with the next Rashi, imbal nefesh ata, if you're a careful person, umit avat lishol, and you want to ask a question, vila amod al ha'ikar, and understand the key point. My takante, how do you fix the issue? Perishimenu. You got to go somewhere else. And so as a result, you got so the bottom line is it's important that when you learn Torah, that you learn Torah from somebody who can answer your questions. That's why I try to take every question that you guys ask. Because when I don't know, I don't know. I'll tell you that. But the point is that we have to be able to take questions and answer those questions in order to be as effective teachers as we possibly can be.
But sometimes people, if they don't know, they encourage people to ask questions so that the teacher can learn with them. Mikol malabdai hiskalti.
Yeah,
So
totally
it's
fine.
not necessarily an
It
embarrassment to that particular teacher because he would want to learn with, and he says, if I don't know, let's learn it together.
100%. And that's why I said what I said, because you're absolutely right. I agree with that philosophy. Unfortunately, not every teacher agrees with that philosophy. And so it's important to be careful and to discover, does the teacher that you're learning with agree with that philosophy and therefore welcomes every question, or will they just be embarrassed by not knowing? You're absolutely right that you have to distinguish between those two cases. Rabbi Yitzchak, so now the Gemara shares another story that about getting wine from a kuti. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yosef, a very similar story. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yosef shadri Rabbi Abahu. So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Yosef was sent by Rabbi Abahu la tuye chamra mebei kutai, again to get some wine from the kutim. Ashkecheha Saba. The Saba comes again. Amrlai, and he says to him, Leis kan shomrei Torah. There are no observers of Torah here. So he doesn't quite quote the same verse, but he says instead there are no Torah observers. Halak Rabbi Yitzchak v'sipur dvarim lifnei Rabbi Abau. So he went and told Rabbi Abau. V'halak Rabbi Abau v'sipur dvarim lifnei Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi. So he goes to Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. V'lo zazu misham ad sha'asaum ovdei kochavim gemurim. And it was not, they didn't move from where they were until they reached the conclusion that the Kutim are going to be treated like complete idolaters. So Lamai, what does it mean to be treated like complete idolaters? Ilashchita, v'yain nesach. If you're going to tell me it's about slaughtering and wine, well then mehasam gazru bahu rabbanan. Are you the mahasam gazru bahu rabbanan? The rabbis previously had already done that. Namely, Rabbi Gamliel had prohibited the slaughter, and Rabbi Meir had prohibited the wine. And Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Meir are both Tanaim, whereas Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi are third generation Amoraim. So inu gazar v'lo kablu minahu. You're absolutely right. Though the earlier ones had made the decree, but it was not accepted. Not accepted partially because it was a question of minority as opposed to majority. Also, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, gazru v'kablu minayu. But when Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi decreed it, everybody accepted it. Maybe it's because it now became a majority. I don't know. But the bottom line is that at that point, their gzera was accepted. So my ovde kochavim gemurim. But what does it mean by saying that they made them as if they were complete idolaters? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak levatel rishus v'litain rishus. It's not just about their slaughtering and their and their wine, but rather also in connection with Shabbos. That when it comes to Shabbos, with respect to their property, if they are an owner in your mavoi, in the sort of the broader courtyard that exists, so then you were going to have an issue with respect to them trying to give you their rights. Look at
Like
this.
an Eruv, making the Eruv Chatzerot, right?
That's exactly right. Well, I just didn't want to give all the details because we're about to cite a brisa, ukititanya, and it's like we have in the following brisa: Yisrael mumar mishamer shabbato bashuk. If you have an apostate who's Jewish, but he is careful to observe Shabbos in the marketplace. When he violates Shabbos, he does so only in private. Well, in that case, mevatel rishus v'nosein rishus. He's considered Jewish enough that if he, you know what, let's do the, you know, well, I'll do it outside. So if he gives up his right to a particular piece of property, or he gives away that right, so then that is going to work with respect to an Eruv, because an Eruv requires the involvement of everyone in the Eruv. Everyone in the Eruv needs to contribute. And if somebody fails to contribute, well, then they need to effectively give up their property rights, or there won't be an Eruv. And so as a result, how would that happen? We'll see in a moment. But the bottom line is that a Jew has the ability to do that. But but if that mumar is not observing Shabbos in the marketplace, he loses his ability to participate in the Eruv through just simply saying that he's giving over his rights. Because we say a Jew, a Yisrael, has that ability. But when it comes to an idolater, you need to rent the property. As Rashi tells us, levatel rishus, it's now from the bottom of the narrow lines of Rashi, it's about 24 lines, 25 lines up, something around that amount. Levato rishus imdar kuti b'mavoi. If you have a kuti who lives in that same mavoi with you, tzarich liskor es rishuso. You need to rent his property in order to create an eruv chatzeros. Va'afilu nasan lahem b'matana. Even if he tries to give you the property as a present, it is not going to work until you actually rent it. It's just like an idolater. The Yisrael, whereas when it comes to a Jew, sheshakach, he forgot to participate, v'no nasan be'eruv, and he didn't give money in order to participate in the eruv. In b'nei amavoi, with the other people in that mavoi, v'hu dari mahen, and he lives there with them, v'oser aleihem, and now as a result of his failure to participate, he's going to create an inability to carry in that area. Mivata lehem rushuso, he can nullify his possession of the property in that mavoi. V'ovid kochavim, but when it comes to a non-Jew, achi yiskor Yisrael, hemenu, a Jew needs to rent it from him. The time of Mefarish behadar es ha'ovid kochavim. Maybe it should be adar im ha'ovid kochavim. Actually, is the name of the parak, but that is the sixth parak of Masechet Eruvin, and so that is the place to look. Daf Samach Tet Amud for more on this topic. And so, as a result. So then the Baraisa continues as we go back into the Gemara.
I just seem to remember that if people are living in an apartment, I don't recall, and years ago, that we had to get reshut if there are, I don't know, 25 apartments. We had to get reshut from everyone to make an Arab in the apartment.
Well, the key is that often the way that is done is
they put a matzah in someone's house, and then
correct. That's generally the case when you don't have an Eruv in the town. When you have an Eruv in the town, so then that Eruv will include all
right,
of that,
absolutely.
because effectively you're buying it. But you're absolutely right. If you want to make an Eruv, if you're live in a building in a non-Eruv situation outside of an Eruv, and you want to create an Eruv so that you can carry in the hallways, you need to create an Eruv Chatzeros. Often that is done with the permission of the either the managing agent or the person who's in charge of dealing with the property. It's easier when it's a rental because then everything is owned by one person. You just go to that one person. When you have another situation, often you have to go to the board or some other organization in order to effectively get permission that you effectively aggregates all the properties together. It's very, we should definitely ask your local Orthodox rabbi if you need to do this in order to make sure that you get it done correctly so that you're not accidentally carrying in a place that you shouldn't be carrying. So back into the Gemara, we're now 6, 9, 12 lines down in the Gemara, fourth word from the end of the line, as the Brisa continues. So, Ketzad, how do you do it? So, Amar Lo, the one person will say to his neighbor, Rishusi Kinuyalach, I'm transferring my possessions are going to be acquired by you. Rishusi Mivutelislach, or my possession is being nullified to you. So in that situation, kana, a neighbor has acquired ve'enu tzarich lezakos, and he doesn't need to do a formal kinyan, as Rashi tells us, lezakos bekinyan chalipin. He doesn't need to do a kinyan chalipin. He is effectively just the words in that case are sufficient because the Jewish neighbor's intent is sufficiently clear. But if it was an idolater, so then we're not going to knock that is not going to be sufficient. We actually have to rent. Okay, so that is that piece. And so, sorry for not scrolling. Let me scroll a little bit.
You
And
can give them a nominal amount of money. So in hotels, it's a
correct.
question about what to do. Sometimes you go to the manager of the hotel, he'll give you $1. So I can use, and that's not, sometimes they don't know what you're talking about and try to.
No, no. So I would tell you, and I've definitely heard this psak, and so I will pass it along that in a hotel, because the hotel has the right to enter any room essentially at any time, really even at any time, that isn't necessary. The hotel is owned all by one person, and so as a result, in that situation, you don't need it. It's not like an apartment that's rented where there are greater privacy rights. In a hotel, there are it's assumed that effectively there are little to no privacy rights. The maids have the ability to enter at almost any time,
Right, right.
and so as a result, so I would tell you that yeah, I'm not saying that not to do it, but I would say that I don't think it's necessary to do an Eruv Chatserus in the hotel context. Whereas in an apartment building context, you should again talk to your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay, so the Gemara now at the end of the day yesterday, we saw that Hashem does not allow righteous people to eat forbidden food accidentally, and their animals are not able to do so. And so we're going to have a series of stories now, concluding with the story tomorrow, I think, that will deal with the chamor, with the animal situation that was the case that was cited over the first days of the Masechet Chulin. So Rabbi
That's
Zeir,
referring to the section where they're comparing Adam with Bahema, but how you can make the comparison. Adam is like Bahema if he's part of it and stuff.
correct, exactly. So Rabbi Zeir, I mean, we're going to see some of that discussion over the course of today. Rabbi Zeir, Rabbi Asi, Ikle lefundika de Yai. So Rabbi Zeir and Rabbi Asi were at the inn of Yai. Aitu lekama, and Rashi tells us lefundika de Yai. Shem Ha'ir, that's the name of the city. The Amei Haaretz Hayu, and the people in that city were not knowledgeable. They were Amei Haaretz, B'chashudim al Hadamai, and therefore you had to be worried that they didn't take Meiser. Umishum de Aisinan Le'el, and since we brought earlier Behemton Shel Tzadikim, how the animals of Tzadikim don't eat something that's not kosher. Nakat, that's why we're going to bring the case now. V'azi lahanach shmaisem, we're going to bring this case. Demairi nami b'ki haigam, it's going to talk about that precise issue. So what happened? Aitul kamaihu beitzim hamutsamokos biyayin. They took some eggs that were roasted with wine. So Rabbi Zera lo achal. Rabbi Zera didn't eat it. But Rav Asi achal. But Rav Asi did eat it. So Amarle Rabbi Zera Rabasi. Rabbi Zera said to Rabasi, "Velo chayish mar l'tarovis damai." Are you not worried that maybe the wine that was mixed into this dish might not have had miser taken, and therefore was damai, and therefore should not be eaten? So Amarle lava daitai. I didn't think about it. So Amar Rabbi Zera thought to himself, so Efsher Gazru al Hatarovas Damai. Is it possible that the rabbis made a gzera about the mixtures of damai, umistaya milsa de Rav Asi lemechal isura, and then it would happen that Rav Asi would accidentally eat something that was prohibited? Hashda be'emtem shel tzadikin. We know that the animals of righteous people, and a Kadosh Baruch Hu maybe takal al yadan, will not allow something bad to happen as a result of them. Tzaddik and Atzman, lo kol shekain. Certainly when it comes to a righteous person himself. So nafak Rabbi Zera dakva eshkach. So Rabbi Zera went out, investigated, and he found the following. The Tanya, we got a brisa. Halokeyach, and this it changed. Although the language in the Gemara says Ditnan, the Vav changes it. The Masoras Hashas changes it to Ditanya because it's actually a brisa, not a Mishnah. So Ditanya. So we have the following brisa. Halokeach yayin laseis lasoch hamuryas. If you buy wine to put into the muryas, or letocha aluntis, or to put it into the aluntis, karshinin, or you buy vetch lasos mehen tchinin to create this ground vetch dish, adashim laasos mehen resisin, or you get the lentils to make this ground lentil dish, chaya mishum demai. In each of the cases, you're going to be liable for demai. You have to be worried about demai, and therefore you need to take meiser. Ve'ein tzarich lomer mishum vadai. And of course, if you know that the meiser wasn't taken, you need to take meiser. Ve'ein atzmat. However, when you buy the final product, so you buy the aluntis or the murias or the tchinin or the resisin, well then, Vehein atzman mutarin, then that would be mutar mibnei shehein tarovis, because they are only a mixture. It is not actual damai. And the rabbinic prohibition associated with damai is only in a case where the object is whole and in its visible state, and not where it has been mixed with other things. So, Tlo Gazru al Tarovas Damai. 1 second. Now you're telling me from the brisa that we just cited that it turns out that we don't have a gzera about mixtures of demai. But Tanya, but 1 second, I'll show that there's a brisa that does say that there's an issue with mixtures of demai. Sorry. And so, because what does it say? Hanosin l'shechento isa. This is le'efot ukadera levashel. If you give to your neighbor some dough to bake or a pot to cook, so then eino choshesh l'seor v'tavlin shaba. You don't need to worry about the seor that's in it, the leavening that's in it, or any spices. Lo mishum shvius. Below mishum meiser, not because of shvius and not because of meiser. V'im amarla, but if you tell her asili mishalechi, make from your stuff choshesh l'shasor v'tavlin shaba, then you do have to worry about the leaven or the spices that are in it. Mishum shvius and mishum meiser, both because of shvius and because of meiser. So doesn't this show that we are worried when that the person might create a mixture that includes these items, and therefore we're worried about demai even in a mixture? No, not necessarily. 2 answers. Shiny Hassam. 1 is that the kaven de Amrla Asili Mishalichi Commander Arabi Adayim Dummy. Well, when you said to the person that you asked to cook it for you, that you said that you should make it yourself, it is as if that person became your agent. And so when they mix the item in, It's as if you mixed the item in. And one of the principles that we have with respect to bittul is that if you do it yourself, the item is not going to be batal. If you do it intentionally, it's not going to be batal. And so as a result, that's going to be one answer, one response to this question. Rav from Amar, Rav from says, you know what? There's another point. Shiny or vitavlin dil time of it. When it comes to leaven and spices, that's different because they are put in order to give a taste. The time of low bottle, and when you have something that is specifically there to give a taste, well, now all of a sudden, even if it's even though it might have been put in the context where it was less than 1/60th. It was there for a taste and it cannot be nullified. And so that's an alternative explanation for why this would be a problem. Okay, so
So
we have
that would say that Rovet does require Tuma and Meiser?
so the tarobit ordinarily does not, but if the item that was mixed in was something that is not batal, well
Right.
now it's no longer effectively a tarobit. Both of these answers basically say that in this particular case, we do not treat this situation as one of tarovet, but rather of actual demai and not
Right. So then it would require Tuma. You don't know what it is. So
absolutely, you
Tuma,
have to
then it
take
would
truma. That's
require
exact.
Tuma and
Well,
Meiser. Oh,
that's exactly
okay.
what that brisa says. So you're absolutely right. And the point is, it's not a question to what Reb Zera found. Meaning, in general, a mixture would not require it. Would a tarovis demai does not require the taking of meiser. However, when the mixture is such that we don't view it as a mixture, so it's not a mixture, well, then of course you're back to having demai, and so as a result, demai requires the taking of maestras. Okay, so
And what's the time that the Rovet does not require in general?
that the tarovet does not require because it's bottle.
Oh, it's Bato.
Yeah, it's bottle. It's not nullified exactly.
Because you can't distinguish between one
Because you
versus the
can't
other.
exactly. That's exactly right. You can't distinguish. That's at least the simple understanding that I have of this Gemara. And that's why these two answers are given. In both of these answers are effectively exceptions to the
Right.
rule of batal.
Exception. Right.
Okay. So ula chalufe lo chayshina. Well, 1 second. Why aren't we worried about a changeroo? Meaning, why shouldn't we be worried that if that somebody switched out the produce, and so as a result, in this case that we just cited in the brisa, meaning that the woman actually would switch out what was given to her for something else. Don't we worry about that? Because listen to the following brisa, v'hatanan hanosin lachamoso. If you give to your mother-in-law, meiser shehu nosin la, you have to take meiser from what you gave to her. The es shehu no tell me mena, and you know what? You also have to take meiser from what you get from her. Because we're worried this is not a bad mother-in-law story. It's actually a good mother-in-law story because we're worried that she's concerned about your well-being. And if she accidentally ruins what you give her, she's going to take from her own and replace it. And she's not going to tell you because she's going to think, oh, I don't want my a child-in-law, to have bad food. And so she'll make her own. And as a result, you have to be worried that she'll have taken from stuff that hasn't been tithe. And again, we're assuming that she and her husband are Am Haaretz, so therefore we don't know that in fact it's been tithe. So Hassam, no, that's a special case. Kidagatani Taima. You got the reasoning right there in the Mishnah. This is a Mishnah, by the way, Demai Perak Gimel Mishnah Vav. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rotza Hibasa Kanas Bita. She's worried about the things being good for her daughter. Uvosha Mechatana. And she's embarrassed for her son-in-law, that if she doesn't serve him a nice bread, he'll be disappointed and won't be happy with her. And so as a result, that's why in that specific case we have to worry about it. Oh, the Gemara asks as we turn to Baba Mabed, Ula Alma lo chayshinan? Once again, are you telling me that in general, beyond the mother-in-law case, we don't have to be worried? What about the following Mishnah? It's the previous Mishnah in Demai. V'hatanan Mishnah Hey in Perak Gimel. Hanosi lefundakis shalo. If you go give to your innkeeper Meiser eshehu no sein la, you have to take Meiser from what you give to her. Ve'eshehu no tel hemena, and what you get back from her. Because we're worried about her switching things up. And our assumption now is that she's going to switch things up not because she likes the person, but because she doesn't like the person. And she's going to say, why should I do this for this this resident of my inn? I don't need to do that. So no, Hasanami Moria Vamra. No, there too, she's going to justify it for herself. So Bar Beirav Lecho Chamima Va'anal Echo Karira. We should have the student, the rabbinical student. He should eat the nice food. He should eat the warm food, and I'll eat the cold food. Now Tosos understands this in the reverse manner, saying, "Oh, she's going to want to do bad." And she's asking a question. It's a bitmia. The rabbinical student is gonna eat the hot food and I'm gonna eat the cold food. Of course not. I'm gonna switch it around. No, but the Rashi understands it as I just explained. Take a look at Rashi. Hasam Nami Muria for top of the end of the top narrow line in Rashi on Vav Mabet. Hasam Nami Lutovahi. There too, the woman is thinking to do something good for her in resident mitkavenet. That's what she's thinking. The hadalo tana ba hamit kalkel, and the fact that we don't reference that things get ruined is not because it isn't a case of ruining, but it's because mishum de afilu ein mitkalkel. Even if it doesn't get ruined, nami, then there too we also need to be worried. Im nitztanen, if it got cold, halechem, the bread got cold, kodem she'achlu, before the people who were the residents in the inn started eating. Michalefet le, she's going to switch it around. Demor Yahora latzma, she's going to justify herself. Latova, saying, I'm doing something good. Latova ani miskavenes. My intentions are good. Barbe Rav lechol chamima. The student should eat hot food. Aval noses l'shechanto. But if you give it to your neighbor, ein la lachosh alav. You don't have to worry about her. Velo mechalefet. She's not going to switch latova to be good. Share ain't samachalef, because you're not relying on her tamid on a regular basis. Ka'achsanai, like a resident of an inn. Ula hara, and you don't have to worry about bad. Nami locha shidei agazel. We're not worried that she's going to steal your thing and put it with something else. So as a result, in the end, we say the following. When you don't need to worry about somebody taking good care of you and therefore switching, then we're not worried about somebody switching out the food. If, however, you need to worry about somebody who's taking care of you, well, then you do need to worry about them switching out the food, and therefore we are concerned about that situation. Okay. So we go back and ask again, once again, are you sure? Are you really sure that we aren't worried about the switcheroo? Why not? But Tanya, we have a brisa that suggests that we're worried about it. Ashes chaver, when it comes to the wife of a non-knowledgeable person, tochenes im ashes am haaretz, who is crushing the grain, grinding the grain with the wife of an Am Haaretz, Bisman shehi tmeya, when she is tamei, and therefore going to be careful not to touch the food, that is okay. Then it's fine. Abalo bisman shehi Torah, but when she's tahora, and therefore is going to be more okay with touching the food because it's not going to become problematic, well, then she has to be careful, because if she touches the food, maybe the other person will touch the food and it will become tamei. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, af bizban shehi tme'a lo titchon. You know what? You have to be worried even when she is tamei.
Who's Tamei here? The Amaret's woman or the other
No,
one?
the non-Am Haaretz woman. And though again, the reason that when she's not an when she's tamei, you don't have to worry about it in the first opinion, in the Tanakhama's opinion, is because she won't touch the food, and if the other woman who is assumed to be tamei and assumed to you're not knowledgeable sees that she's not touching the food, well then she won't touch the food either, and so as a result, there won't be any issue of anybody touching the food and it becoming tamei.
How are they going to process the grain without touching it?
It's in bags, and you pour the bag into the grinder, and then you turn the mill, and so as a result, the mill and out comes the flour into another container, and then you pour that flour from that container into your next container that's
All
going to
without
hold the food.
touching, but touching. We had this discussion a few days ago. If she's touching the metal, there might be a question if she's that to transfer.
Excellent point. Excellent point. You'd have to make sure that the vessels that we're talking about are either pottery or a stone. If they're pottery or stone, so then it won't be an issue. So
Okay.
mimnei shechaverta nosenes la v'ocheles. But according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, even when the wife of the chaver is tamei, so then she needs to we're worried that the other woman is going to give her something and she's just going to say, "Oh, that's so nice of you," and eat it, and that will be problematic because it will be demai. So hashta migzal gazla. And so here we're worried that this wife of the Am Haaretz is going to steal from her husband. Chalufa mibai. How can we not be also worried that she's going to make an exchange? So Rav Yosef Hasamurya va'amra Torah midishay kachel. Well, there's a very good justification for the wife of the Am Haaretz thinking that she could take food that she's working with and eat it. Because the Torah itself tells us that an ox, when it is on the threshing floor, has the right to eat. And
Right.
so as a result, she presumably also has that right. And so even though she's doing the wrong thing by eating and doing the wrong thing by giving it away, so as a result, it's still going to be problematic. But in the ordinary situation where you give your neighbor something to cook or something to bake, then it's not going to be a concern. We don't worry about the switcheroo. Okay.
What is the issue with her husband? You mentioned that she would take from her husband.
Well, the food doesn't belong to her because all the things that the grinding of the grain belongs to her husband. We're assuming that these are situations more typical in that age situation. All possessions
Right.
effectively belong to the husband. Nothing belongs to the wife. And so as a result, she is effectively taking from the husband without his permission. Now, Tosos has an issue with this
But
entire.
she's working with the non-Amaret's woman, right? So
No,
they're
well, that
working
was
on
the
a great.
Amharitz woman that we were talking about. The
Well,
Amharitz woman is the one who's taking from her husband that we're worried about.
the
We're not worried.
non-Amaret's woman is taken from her husband.
No, the
Uh,
Amharitz woman. The
but they're
Amharitz
working.
woman.
They're
The
work. The
yes
two
Amharitz woman is taking from her husband.
right,
The
but the two
non
women are working together, processing the grain, right?
Correct. They're working separate together but separately, meaning they are not putting their grain into the same grinder and taking out and splitting the produce.
Okay.
Excuse me, please. They are each working independently but together in the same space. That's the situation that we're dealing with.
So, but she got this. She got the grain from her husband in the first place. It's not her grain.
Correct. Correct. It's her
So,
husband's grain. But now she's eating it without her husband's permission.
oh, okay.
And so as a result, that's stealing. Now, Tosos has a big problem with that, and as a result, offers a different explanation, but that's beyond our scope for right now. And so as a result, that's we'll leave it
I
there.
mean,
But
I'm a little puzzled. How is it without his permission? She didn't he send her to do the? She's
yes, he
working
sent
for.
her to do the grinding, but he didn't say that you can eat any of the produce. The produce, I'm giving you, he's saying to his wife, listen, I'm going to feed you. You don't need to eat what I'm going to sell. You're gonna,
Oh,
what I'm gonna sell needs to get processed so I can sell it all. I
uh-huh.
can't, I can't have you eating the produce that I'm going to sell in the marketplace. So that's the way I understand this case to sort
But
of justify Rashi's explanation. This is Rashi's explanation. Again, Tosfos has a problem with it because of the question that you're asking, Ken. The How is it that the husband doesn't allow his wife to eat a little bit? That just
right.
seems very unlikely. And so as a result, he has to offer a different explanation, but the explanation doesn't fit as well into the words as I think that Rashi just fit very nicely. And so I'm going to leave it at that, but note that your question is a good one.
I
Oh,
see. But we do that, don't we allow a worker who is working in the fields to eat some of the produce while he's working? He's picking the
excellent
grapes
point.
and so forth.
And
And
again, that is the justification that Rav Yosef says. Because it's funny that you're right. Because why doesn't the Gemara? You're asking a very, very good question. I think that I don't know the answer to. Which is why does the Gemara raise the ox eating what it's threshing? Why not say that a worker in the field can eat the produce as he's picking it? Well,
exactly.
oh, but the answer, so that is a good question. I don't know why it doesn't cite it, but I will note that ends when you come to the grinding, meaning that halacha does not also apply to a person you hire to grind your grain. It only applies in the field for the picker who's picking the grapes. Once you bring those grapes and bring them to the press, that halacha doesn't apply anymore. So it's important to note. So there's an aspect of, and maybe this is the answer, which is if we brought the case of the worker, well, then the worker he stops being able to eat the food once it leaves the field. It's only while he's in the field that he's able to eat the food. Whereas the ox is threshing, right? That's similar to grinding. And so as a result, maybe you could say that just as the ox eats the grain that's grinded in the threshing floor, so too, because it's being, this is separated from the husk, so too the wife can eat the flour that she's grinding when she's doing the grinding of the grain into the flour. So that would be my explanation as to why it doesn't give the example that, but I do think your question is an excellent question, effectively on the Gemara of why not reference the case of a human worker as opposed to an animal worker. Okay. So let's do one little piece additionally, and we'll close with that. So, hey, Rabbi ben Zeriz ben Chamiv shall Rabbi Meir lifnei Rabbi al Rabbi Meir. So Rashi tells us that this is being brought here again as another case in which the God prevents the downfall through the righteous. And so Rabbi Yeshua ben Zeriz, the son of Rabbi Meir's father-in-law, he testified in front of Rabbi about Rabbi Meir's what he did. What did Rebbe Meir do? She'achal aleh shel yerek bebeishan. He ate a vegetable in Beishan, and Rashi explains without tithing it. She'achal the hitir Reb, and as a result, the hitir Rebbe as Beishan kula al yado. So as a result, Rebbe says all of Beishan no longer subject to taking tithes of vegetables. And Rashi explains that this was done based on this testimony,
Was
and
it Chutz La'aretz?
exactly that effectively what it's concluding is Rebbe is saying that this is not part of Eretz Yisrael, and therefore, even though when you're just outside of Eretz Yisrael, we are concerned with respect to grain and say that even grain does require rabbinic tithing because inside Eretz Yisrael, tithing of grain is biblical. When it comes to tithing of yerek, of vegetables, which in Eretz Yisrael is understood to be only rabbinic. So as a result, we're not going to make a double decree and not going to require it in a place that is outside of Eretz Yisrael. And so as a result, Beit Shan is outside of Eretz Yisrael. So Amrulo, everybody said to Rebbe, Makom sha'avosecha va'avos avosecha na'agu bo is when it comes to a place that your ancestors all assumed that you had to take tithes and said that the produce was prohibited if you didn't, Atatin hogbo heter, you're going to now say it's permitted? So Darish lahan mikra zeh. So as a result, Rebbe said, I'm going to cite a verse for you. v'chitat nechash hanechoshes asher asa Moshe ki ad hayamim hahema hayu v'nei Yisrael mekatrim lo vayikra lo nechushtan. This is a pasuk, Malachim Bet, Perek Yurchet, pasuk Dalid, which means the following: and it's referring to Chizkiah Melch Yehuda, crumbled the copper serpent that Moshe had made, and because until those days the Bnei Israel had burned incense to it, and so and they and Chizkiah called that place Nechushtan. So Efshar ba asa velo biaro ba Yehoshat velo biaro, and so Rebbe now, after citing this verse, points out, was what about Asa? He was a good king, and he didn't destroy this the Nachash Hanachoshes. And what about Yehoshaphat? He was a good king, and he didn't destroy it. V'halo kol avoda zarav sheba olam asa v'Yehoshaphat biarum. And yet Asa and Yehoshaphat destroyed all the idols. So how could they have left it open? Elamakom hinicholo avosav lehis. As we turn to Zion Amud Aleph, Elamakom hinicholo avosav lehis gaderbo. No, there was a place that was left by Asa and Yehoshaphat for Chizkiah to lehiskaderbo. What does it mean, lehiskader? Take a look at second line on Zion Amud Aleph. Lehiskader, lehiskadel, to make himself great. And back into the first Rashi, makom hinicho kishiyavo benenu, when our son comes around, acharenu, after us, im lo yimtzu malatakin, if he doesn't find anything to fix, b'ma shmam, shmam, how is he going to make his name great? What is he going to use to distinguish himself? So afani, so that's why in fact that was done. Afani, so to me. Makom hinichuli avosai lehiskaderbo. The fact that my ancestors thought it was prohibited was just a way of enabling me to distinguish myself. And we're going to learn a few lessons from this, but for those lessons, you'll need to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Looking forward to continuing our learning together.
There's some, maybe it's a stretch, but when we talked about the the produce between
switching around the food, yes,
between this woman, that man, and so forth, there is a concept in, I think, in halacha, in kashrut, in the restaurant. So the yotze v'nichnas, right? So someone come. So the question arises: well, what if they run out of this oil and it goes next door to the non-kosher shop, brings it in? So people say, listen, if everyone, they don't do it in general because, I mean, it could happen rarely, but they don't generally do it because that moment the Rav could walk in. And so they're
yeah,
afraid that he could walk in, and then he sees him, they'll shut down the whole place. It won't be kosher anymore.
correct. Look, you're absolutely right. But the simple answer is that this is not a doing it for money situation, and so as a result, the issues that you raise in terms of kashrus generally don't necessarily apply. I'm sorry that they need
Right.
this room, but we'll pick up, God willing, from there, and happy to discuss this also as we begin the day tomorrow. Looking forward to continuing our learning then.